Welcome to the True North Fantasy Football Podcast.
What up, fantasy people? Live on the TNFF network. This is the True North Fantasy Pod. I am Trav. As always, I'm posted up in Dirty Laundry Studios. You can find me at TCL14. And this podcast is a part of the great content coming out of the True North Pod Network. We're actually up to 6 pods now, 4 of which are live streamed on the YouTube channel and Periscope. And of course, all of our written work is on TrueNorthFFB.com. I also want to give a quick thanks to our partners over at Viridian Global. Because of them, we feel like we offer the best merch in the biz. Viridian's got the best designs, premium quality gear. I've actually got a Jet Sweep Show shirt on right now. So that's one of our shows. It's on Sunday nights at halftime. And yeah, you can, if you want to find some of that gear, you can find it at the True North site or go to viridianglobal.com and you can find all the Viridian wear, as well as all of the brands that are in the Viridian Football Collective, which is a bunch of stellar sites and fantasy football brands from around the industry. All their stuff is housed at viridianglobal.com. So we really appreciate Will and Mark for all the hard work over there. Yeah, so flying through the season right now, creeping up on week 8, and it's been a bit of a shit show at times for the fantasy season, but we're still plugging away. And tonight I am stoked about my guests coming on. A couple of friends from the Undroppables. Boys I've had Term on, I've had Stoner, Jax, Paulie, Beezy, all the OGs, but tonight I'm saying that those guys are old news, and I'm bringing in some fresh blood from the Can't Cut crew. Just below me on the video screen, you can see my man Kaynen Harris. You can find him at Kane Rob. That's Kayne. He's a producer and a contributor with the Undroppables, and he actually has his own podcast, which is very fitting for the time of year that we're at, Kaynen. With Halloween coming up, that podcast is called Grim Conclusions. Kaynen, how you doing, my man?
Good, man. I'm excited to be on the pod with you, and you're right about that. I've been watching scary movies like nobody's business with that other pod too, so I feel like it's all football and scary movies for me right now.
Hey, that's the time of year for it, man. It's a good time, and Halloween's going to be pretty exciting. Hopefully everybody is nice and safe on Halloween, of course. And my other guest tonight is Kyle Larson. You can find him at KL_fantasy. He is another contributor doing written work for the Undroppables, as well as some social media stuff. Kyle, it's a pleasure to have you on, man.
Yeah, I'm actually in kitchen studios. I'm posted up in the corner of my kitchen. Beauty, right on. So I love the studio names, right? It just adds a little bit of buzz. And mine is literally because this is my laundry room. So there's no fun meaning behind that. You can see the curtain behind me there. There are laundry machines behind that. So yeah, it's super fun to have you guys on. Really appreciate it. We love collaborating with the Undroppables crew. Lots of good friends over there. And obviously some stellar content. I mean, some of those guys, like I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't have those guys to bounce stuff off of. So yeah, we really appreciate them, and we're pretty excited to get into it. Tonight, guys, we're going to talk about some crowded position groups. We're going to go through a few rooms around the NFL that have multiple players that we need to decipher a little bit and tell the people kind of who they should be looking for out of those groups. Of course, as always, we have a segment of I Got 5 on it with Monkey Knife Fight, where we're going to go through a DFS player prop game and try and make a little cheddar. And lastly, we're going to get into a couple trending players throughout the fantasy landscape, and we're going to just kind of talk about whether we think they are somebody who should be trending and who you should be trying to roster. Before that, guys, I just want to say a quick word from a sponsor of ours. We're working with Expand the Box Score, and we love what they do. So, yeah, just a quick word here.
Expand the Box Score is the essential database for stat heads like us. With NFL, NBA, MLB, college football, and even minor league baseball, they've got something for everyone. We use their NFL and college football bundle for lots of our deep dives, and you can find stats on there that you can't find anywhere else. The college football database specifically is invaluable in the offseason as you try to prepare for your rookie drafts. and you'll find something new every time you log on. If you want to start doing some data digging, head over to expandtheboxscore.com and use promo code TrueNorth10 at checkout to get 10% off. Again, that promo code is TrueNorth10 for 10% off. Expand the box score. Superior stats to dominate fantasy football.
All right. Big shout out to our man Dan Made Graphics for that video. All the video stuff you see on the live stream tonight is done by Dan Made Graphics, and a local buddy of mine. We call him Homeschool John for the beats. So our intro track and the music that is on those videos are all from Homeschool John. We appreciate him too. So gentlemen, crowded position groups. It's going to be an interesting one to break down. There's a lot of them across the league. I wish we could have covered them all, but I picked some choice ones, I think. A couple of running back groups, a couple of wide receiver groups, and we're going to kind of just go through. We're going to talk about them and kind of what the split's looking like, or what we think, who the guy that can emerge and be the best roster piece is. So first, guys, we're going to talk about the Ravens running backs. I know they're coming off of a bye, but that backfield has previously been the hotness. It's been a little bit of a weird split this year. Kyle, I want to start with you on this one, though. Is this a backfield that you're still coveting for fantasy football? I know Ingram's got that injury as well, but when all three are healthy, do you think that's something you're still trying to target?
It's something you look at, and it makes sense, like right off the bat, because they're eighth in rushing attempts. But like Lamar has 8.3 a game. 8.3 rushing attempts a game, and that puts him down at like 21.9 rushing attempts per game for their running backs, which just isn't all that great. And then you add in that committee approach that they have. It just doesn't really work out well for one specific player in fantasy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a pretty agonizing split as somebody who has a lot of J.K. Dobbins and a fair bit of Mark Ingram as well. Mark Ingram has been super frustrating. Sucks that he's banged up, but at the same time, it might provide a little clarity. Kaynen, what are you thinking? Are you still kind of going after these running backs from certain avenues, or is this one you might be staying away from?
To be honest, I kind of was avoiding this backfield in the first place just because I didn't know how it was going to shake out right away. And I was kind of afraid I thought, Mark Ingram would get his touches like he did last year, but I thought that J.K. Dobbins was going to creep up on him early. And then seeing Gus Edwards still getting that work later on as well, I was looking at their snaps, and it literally trades between the three backs, who's getting the most snap share, who's getting the most touches, and Edwards getting the most. So I'm just like, I've always been kind of out on it. And then you add in the Lamar Jackson factor, like Kyle just said, and I'm just like, I'll back out for now. And maybe looking at one person in specific for Dynasty, I'll have some interest in, but overall, I'm out.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. Like Mark Ingram, like I said, is on some of my rosters, and he's like a permanent bench spot, if not dropped. It's interesting to see that offense shift, though, because Kyle, you mentioned the high rushing volume, which is something we kind of expected. But on an overall play volume, they're actually only on pace to have like 962 plays, which would be 100 plays less than they had last year. So that is quite the stark shift for an offense that was pretty fast last year. And then those touches, like you said, Kaynen, like the snaps are like almost identical. Gus has 48 carries to Mark Ingram's 50 to Dobbins' 25. But then Dobbins, who isn't getting used that much, is clearly the most explosive with 6.2 yards per attempt, where the other guys have 4.5. So I really kind of, like you, Kaynen, want to see J.K. Dobbins emerge out of that backfield because he's so good. And like, especially from a dynasty lens, that's definitely the guy to target. So if you guys had to for the rest of the season, Kaynen, we'll start with you because you said you were out. So I'm curious to see where you would go with this one. Who would be the guy that you would pick for the rest of the season if you had to pick one of the guys out of this backfield?
Man, my gut is telling me if I had to do it for this season only, I would go with Gus Edwards just because of end zone upside. I think that he'll get the most looks towards the end zone and red zone opportunities. And with Mark Ingram being out at least probably 1 or 2 games, maybe a little bit longer or shorter, who knows? We haven't really got the full say on that yet. But I think if he capitalizes on this opportunity given to him, that they'll keep running him this year. So I find it hard not to grab him for this season only.
I like that take because a lot of people wouldn't take Gus as like the least sexy name out of the group, right?
Right.
Kyle, what are you thinking? Who are you going to take?
I'm going to go with the most sexy name out of the group, that 6.2 yards per attempt, J.K. Dobbins. It's not because of what I've seen so far. It's because of what could happen. And frankly, I think if any one of them is going to emerge over the other two, it's going to be Dobbins, and it's not going to be Ingram or Gus. So I'm taking the ceiling here with Dobbins.
I'm with you on that too. I do like Gus. I picked him up on a couple of squads just on waivers this week where I could find him. But it's JK for me just because of, like you said, that explosiveness and the upside, right? It's not been realized yet. And he could disappoint if he does get more rushing work, but still doesn't get any of that red zone work, like you were saying, Kaynen. I think the red zone split, I don't know offhand, but I think Lamar's got like 9 red zone totes, and then Ingram's got 8. Gus Edwards has 8 or something like that. So it's a pretty even split so far, but obviously that Ingram injury is going to make somebody have to emerge. So Kaynen,
in PPR, JK has almost 10 targets more than anyone else in that backfield.
That's right. So of the minimal targets that the running backs unfortunately get in Baltimore,
he does have 14 on the season.
Yeah, for sure, which is like a solid number versus Baltimore running back expectations for sure. And that kind of brings me to, I want to talk about a little bit of the dynasty value there, guys. We do a little bit of redraft, a little bit of dynasty here on the True North Pod. And Kaynen, you alluded to the dynasty value of J.K. Dobbins. So I'm curious to see kind of how high do you think you guys could put J.K. Dobbins if you were to do just kind of a loose ranking? So Kaynen, why don't you kick that off?
Yeah, I mean, I like his upside overall, and especially being in that offense that runs the ball so much, especially as Mark Ingram kind of fades into the nothingness that probably will happen here sooner than later. So currently looking at my dynasty rankings for running backs, I have him at RB 14, just behind Joe Mixon and Nick Chubb, and just ahead of DeAndre Swift and Kareem Hunt. So I do like his upside overall, and I think he has a lot of potential overall.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement there. And Kyle, it sounds like you are as well. JK, a screaming dynasty asset.
I don't know about 14. I don't really have dynasty rankings written down, but I don't think I'd put him as high as 14. I think I'd probably put him down near like 20, maybe 22 even, just because I think it's going to be hard for Baltimore to move on from the committee, even if they do move on from Ingram.
Right.
Just because there are so many talented backs in the NFL now, and it helps a team like the Ravens, who are going to run the ball so much, to have more than one that can come in there and take touches.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think the only thing for me is I don't think that they'll keep going 3-back committee. I think when the opportunity presents itself, they'll go to 2, and I think he can capitalize more with that opportunity. But I also have him a lot ahead of a lot of guys that I wasn't really high on coming into the season, like Eckler and Kenyon Drake and guys like that. I just haven't ever been on those guys, and I know you're shaking your head because you're big on both of those guys, if I recall. So
not on Drake anymore, but
all right, guys. So I'm going to drop a little bombshell that I have J.K. Dobbins as my dynasty running back 12. So I got him way up there. And that is from exactly what you said, Kaynen, that I think it's going to be a 2-back system as opposed to a 3. I think, Gus Edwards was still there, so they're kind of like, might as well use him, and he's been fairly effective, so they're going to continue to use him. But I think after this season, it should clear up. And I think the main thing is the carry volume and the touchdown upside. There's a lot of red zone carries to be had in that backfield, and a lot of efficient carries with Lamar opening lanes and drawing that defensive attention. So, yeah, I got JK pretty high in the dynasty rankings. I could see that, coming back to bite me in the ass just because he's not going to get that pass catching. But if you can give him like 20 to 30 receptions per season, I think he can hit that ceiling and supplement with the touchdowns. So it's an interesting case though, because we thought that it was going to be more of a condensed backfield as far as carries, but not so much. What's going on, Sam? Sam Wallace is there to say hello. Great to see you too, brother. Okay, so for this next one, guys, this is a really intriguing one that we're going to get into because there's a new face in this place, and his name is Antonio Brown, Tony Toe Taps, coming into Tampa Bay. It is a very interesting fit. Bruce Arians had him previously in Pittsburgh, and Tom Brady had him for all of one game in New England. Obviously, we know that Chris Godwin's going to miss this coming week, potentially a couple more. I think it was a broken bone in his foot, if I do recall. But I mean, so it looks like AB is going to be coming in this week. Bruce Arians came out with some positive comments today, I believe, saying that he's going to be ready to rock. So Kyle, what do you think AB's relevancy is as soon as he steps in? Like, is he immediately a top 24 wide receiver, or are you balking at that?
Shoot. I mean, next week, if he's playing and Godwin's out, he's a top 24 receiver. But I don't know. It's not a talent issue with AB. Of course, it's a off the field issue. I've gotten burned by AB one too many times in fantasy. I'm not ready to hop back on that.
Where are you sitting, Kaynen? Do you have the sting of being burned by AB previously? Or are you buying?
I don't have the sting, but I'm also not buying too much. I think the opportunity could be there, but there's just so many pass catching weapons there. And I know people are kind of getting scared of Mike Evans recently with the couple of bad games, but I think he's going to have his boom games just like he always does. And I think it's hard to buy 100% into any option there as a top dog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, I would probably put him in the top 24, mainly if Godwin's out. If Godwin's in there, it's a really tough call, of course. But I think just with Evans's low target share so far, Godwin's been banged up most of the season, really. And then the Scotty Miller and Tyler Johnson, who I love, both of them are probably not playing over AB. So that's why I would say AB probably is that. It's a tough guy to buy right now, though, because people have either been holding him for a long time, waiting for this, or people are now trying to sell for a king's ransom. So it's a really, really tough guy to buy right now. But if you could get a discount on like top 24 value, I probably would go that route. So then if we flip it, we were talking about Godwin being out. What about if Godwin is in there? That split just feels like it's going to be kind of gross. Kyle, how are you feeling about that? Like we kind of talked that it's not necessarily the best situation, but do you think Brady can keep three guys relevant?
I don't know about elite relevancy, but they'll all be relevant. I think Godwin is still going to be elite, actually, because if you look at what he's done so far, he's only played 4 games. But if he had played 7 like the rest of his team, he'd have 51 targets just based on those 4 games, which is like that's like 20 more than 15 more than anyone else on that team. Mm-hmm. So obviously Brady loves the dude. He's a great player. He's caught 86.2% of those targets. I'm still in on Godwin for sure. But
me too.
Evans is a little concerning though. Hopefully he does come back to what he's been in the past, because I have him on a few rosters and I'm not sure what to do with him anymore.
I hear you, man. I hear you. He's actually on pace to have his first season not hitting 1,000 yards, which would be kind of sad because it's a cool run that we're getting to watch from Mike Evans. Kaynen, like if all 3 of these guys are healthy, who do you think is going to be the best option week to week?
I still think it's Godwin. I think he's, like Kyle said, he's kind of shown the stud he can be. And that was a big thing I wanted to point out as well, is that 86.2 catch rate. I mean, that's just crazy. It's second in the league right now. And so he's making the best of the opportunities that he is having. And I think we've seen Brady go to the slot a lot. They still run him in the slot. So I think that he's definitely the best option of the 3. And I think, if anything, this AB addition hurts Scotty Miller the most, who was seeing the most opportunity even without the injuries of Evans and Godwin on and off. So I think that he takes that role more.
Yeah, Scotty Miller's been great, man. It's been cool to see one of those guys that Brady just picks out that he likes and just targets him, and he's efficient. So kind of cool to see that little story there. I think, it's going to be such a weird split there, because Godwin to me is the guy as well. He's got the slot role lockdown. 55% of his snaps have been in the slot, whereas obviously Evans is playing outside, and AB is kind of a do-it-all talent, of course, but he was only in the slot 11% of the time his last 3 years with the Steelers. So I think he's going to play some outside as well, which not only does it hurt Scotty Miller, I think that could potentially hurt Evans a little bit as well. So it's going to be an interesting split, but I'm with you guys. It's Godwin or bust as far as long-term and probably rest of the season as well, just because the lockdown role that he's got with Brady there. So let's move over to Mike Evans and dig into that a little bit, guys, because it's been really unfortunate. He's the wide receiver 22 right now, which isn't like not rosterable or anything like that, but it's definitely not the top 10. Yeah.
You definitely shouldn't cut him in redraft.
Yeah. Don't drop.
He's undroppable.
Redraft. Yeah. Hashtag can't cut. But yeah, so for Mike Evans as the wide receiver 22, luckily he's been getting those touchdowns. But Kyle, let's start with you, man. Do you think better days can be ahead for Mike Evans? I know we kind of detailed a little bit of that with the AB talk, but why don't you break down what you've been seeing and what you think is going to happen going forwards for Mike Evans?
I sure hope there's better days. I mean, in the past, he's Like last season, I think he had at least one donut, maybe two. So I think he is kind of a boom bust guy just in general. So hopefully he's had more busts than usual through this part of the season. So hopefully he has a little more booms through the back half of the season.
Yeah, I think it's possible with AB there too, drawing some of that defensive attention. And Evans, obviously, we know is a great player. So how about you, Kaynen? Do you think there could be like a little bit of a buy low window that's open for Mike Evans? I guess not only for rest of season, obviously, but for dynasty players as well.
I think so. I mean, we know that Arians likes to pass the ball a lot, so he's going to have some opportunity from volume alone. But I think that, again, he's always been a boom bust guy. We've seen more of the boom than bust. But last year, I just pulled up his numbers in a half PPR, and he had started out with a 3-point game, then an 8-point game. He had a donut in there, like Kyle said, and then he had other 8 and 7. So it's just like we've seen the low, and I think we're seeing the bad part of it now, and that touchdown upside keeps him relevant. You just got to play him at the right time, which is a guessing game at this point. But
totally, it's super hard to sit too, right? Like really hard to take Mike Evans out of the lineup being attached to Tom Brady. You mentioned the volume there. They've got the 6th most pass attempts. Brady's top 10 in average depth of target, air yards. They're number 1 in red zone and deep ball attempts, which seem to cater to Mike Evans, right? So I kind of think there are better days ahead for him with that 15% target share. It's just, even if that doesn't necessarily go up, he's got 5 targets inside the 10, and he's caught all 5 of them 4 touchdowns. So he's getting that work in the red zone, which is obviously going to keep him afloat. But at wide receiver 22, he's dangerously close. He hasn't finished outside of wide receiver 20 in his career in PPR, guys. So it's going to be interesting to see that shake out, especially with AB coming to town. I hope Evans can do it because I've always kind of liked him. People pigeonhole him as, that contested catch guy, which, I mean, there is some truth to that, but the guy's a great receiver and he's super fun to watch play. So a couple of those big Julio 200-yard games and he'll be right back inside that top 20, I'm feeling. And he's capable every week.
I feel like he's definitely bound for at least 1 or 2 huge games. Hopefully you found him and play him on that week, but we'll see what happens.
I did want to just touch on what you said about AB possibly drawing coverage. The thing is, like, other than that 2 touchdown game where he had 2 1-yard receptions, all of his good games have come with Godwin out rather than Godwin in.
That's fair. So I guess it's kind of, that could go both ways, that argument for sure. And especially if you add Godwin and AB in there, it's going to be interesting to see who's getting the most defensive attention, as all 3 of these guys are pretty much alpha wide receivers, right? And then you add Gronk in the mix, who's getting more involved in the red zone as well. So these guys could all eat into each other in so many different ways. So I'm still taking pieces of it though, because they're all high end players.
I have an interesting question for you just on the topic. Chris Godwin is a free agent at the end of the year. Do you think he's going to end up staying in Tampa, or do you think there's an opportunity that he leaves?
That is a really tough one because he's going to want to get paid after his season last year. And, they have 2 young guys in Scotty Miller and Tyler Johnson that are good. Mike Evans is there, and who knows, obviously AB's not signed through the end of this year, but who knows what happens with him at the end of the season. I would lean towards, yes, they're going to get a deal done for him because they have Tom Brady and they want to maximize that potentially couple-year window. Kyle, what do you think on that one, though? Do you think Godwin's going to stay? It'd be exciting to see him on the free agent market for sure.
Oh, yeah. Just off the top of my head, I'm not sure how much cap Tampa Bay has because they've obviously had to sign like Shaq Barrett recently, and Tom's getting plenty of money. AB might go for a pretty penny if he shows up this year. I think it's going to depend on if they can offer him that kind of money that he's going to want because he is an elite receiver. But we definitely are looking at quite the free agent class next year if some of these guys don't re-sign, because Juju's out there as well. I'm not sure if Kenny Galladay's re-signed. I don't think he has. Allen Robinson possibly even. Have quite some good wide receivers possibly changing teams next year.
For sure. So I'm just looking on over the cap, and they're projected to have 28 million in cap space next year. So if you factor in Godwin, he's probably going to want like 15 plus. That doesn't leave them with a whole lot to fill out the rest of the roster. So, but these guys can do a lot of work with that salary cap too, right? So it'll be a fun one to watch for sure. Okay, the next one, guys. This one's a little bit more sad, a little bit less fireworks. The Dallas Cowboys wide receiver room. Just 2 weeks ago, we were saying this is probably the best wide receiver core in the league. And now with Andy Dalton and potentially Ben DiNucci, I think is how you pronounce the guy's name, it's not looking so hot for these guys. So, Kyle, just why don't you tell me what you make of this group with no more Dak in the fold?
I mean, not for fantasy, but I still think it's one of the best wide receiver groups in the league. Without Dak, obviously they lose a lot in fantasy, and that offensive line doesn't give Dalton any time to throw deep either. Kind of the same situation as we have in Chicago right now with Foles. Because, they have three starting offensive linemen who are out right now. It's hurting Zeke too. But, yeah, I think they're all still really good players. I'd still be happy to have them in Dynasty. I'm just not going to trust them for this year, sadly.
Yeah, super sad because those guys have been super reliable. Like I've got a team like with Lamb, and I did not expect this production, but he's been a staple.
Yeah, but on the other side of the coin, there's this possibility that because their defense has been so poor that they're just going to have to fire for the entire second half of games at some point. But I don't think Dalton's the right guy to do that, of course. So maybe if DiNucci is going to just throw the ball up, we'll see what happens. Or there's always those rumors about Ryan Fitzpatrick possibly joining the Cowboys. I know he'll throw it up for sure. But
yeah,
we'll
I've heard a lot of that actually. I have a hard time seeing the Dolphins letting go of him with Tua getting his feet wet, but man, that would be awesome to see him go there. Kaynen, how about you? How are you feeling about this wide receiver core just for like the rest of the season as fantasy roster pieces?
Yeah, I mean, here's my thought process. I think the last game and a half we've seen is the absolute worst it can get for him. So hopefully there should be some better days ahead. I don't think it's going to be that top potential that we saw with Dak that we all want. But I think that Amari for sure should be a playable asset. He showed out a little bit still in that last game playing with the two not so good quarterbacks. So I think that he's still an option you're playing every week. CD is the option where I don't know. He still got a good 5 targets in the last game. I think he had 7 or 8 in the game before that. So he's still seeing opportunities, but they're not great opportunities as far as the quality of pass. So I think they're lower for me, but I think that Amari is still in that top 24 and maybe CD is just outside. And Gallup, it's just so hard. I kind of have my fingers crossed hope that maybe they'll trade him this deadline. I don't think it's going to happen, but for my fantasy purposes, I would love that. I would love to see him go elsewhere.
Yeah, that would be super excellent. We're actually why don't we dive into that right now, gentlemen, I guess it seems kind of like the writing is on the wall that Michael Gallup might be the odd man out because to me, Amari is the number one. And he's super expensive for them to cut before 2022. I think he's like $28 million if they were to cut him next year. So with Gallup's contract ending at the end of next year, he's going to want to get paid. So if they let Gallup's deal expire, they might be able to get Gallup signed and then cut Amari. But I think Gallup's going to want to get paid before that. So Kyle, is that kind of what you're seeing as well? Is that Gallup might be the guy who has to hit the road?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like being the Cowboys, it makes the most sense for them, at least because Amari can't go. There's no way they can let him go. CD's on his rookie deal. There's no reason to move him. And I don't know, Gallup's had a bit of a drop problem too. He had 11 drops in 2019. So maybe he could be on the move. I'd be happy to see him go on the move just somewhere he can get more targets, but for fantasy at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's been a solid player too. Like I think it was kind of like they didn't expect to have CD in the draft. They didn't think they were going to be getting him. So now, unfortunately, that renders a really good player, kind of the odd guy out, like we're saying. So let's move a little bit over to CD here, actually, guys. I want to talk dynasty value because there are a lot of people saying that CD is like a top 3 dynasty wide receiver. So Kaynen, why don't we start with you? How high would you've got the dynasty rankings you were saying, so how high do you have CD Lamb and kind of what are your thoughts on his future?
Look, I love CD. I think that he can be a top 5 guy probably sooner than later, but right now I have him as the wide receiver 8, which is still pretty high. The talent is there. We see that. We've seen it in college. We've seen it in the NFL briefly already. So I think he's a great receiver to have. But when I look at it, I see a 3-year window, and I don't think that this rookie year is going to be what we want it to be as much anymore that Dak is out, and that plays into that factor for me. So I think that he's more towards that back half of 10 as opposed to the top half.
Yeah, for sure. I actually have him right now as my dynasty wide receiver 10. And you kind of alluded to kind of where I wanted to steer this was, Kyle, whether the Dak contract situation affects how you view CD over the next few years, or are you willing to buy in regardless of the quarterback that's playing there?
I mean, I'd agree with both of you right off the bat that I don't have him in a top 5. I'd have probably put him at a little lower than both of you, probably around 12. As for Dak, I think he'll stay. I think he'll stay. Even if he doesn't, the Cowboys could have a pretty low pick this year since Dak's out. So if he doesn't choose to stay, then like Lance might be on the table, or even like Howell or somebody who's not Fields or Lawrence, obviously, because I don't think they'll go that far down. But one of those second-tier quarterbacks in the draft could be available.
For sure.
One thing with Dak too, I don't think it's mentioned enough, but like financially for Dak, if he can get that contract from Dallas, it makes sense for him to stay just because they're America's team, whether we like it or not. I'm not a Cowboy fan, but it presents opportunities for him in the industries of advertising and marketing and all of that, and it only helps him further. So I feel like if that offer comes, he's not going to deny it. So
for sure.
Plus the Joneses are pretty I don't know what's the word. They're pretty consistent with their team. They they really love their players. I'm just saying, like they're not business minded when it comes to contracts. Sometimes that ruins them. Sometimes like the Jalen Smith deal, way overpaid that dude. But I don't think they're gonna try and let Dak go. I think they're definitely gonna try and keep him around.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for both sides too. Like for the Cowboys, they obviously know that he's going to be great in that system. For Dak, even if he was to shorten up the term on the deal, recoup some of that value in one of the best offenses in the league, essentially, or even if he does sign long-term, he knows that he's going to have all these weapons. So I think it makes sense for both sides, really.
Yeah, I think if their quarterback play continues how it's been the last 2 weeks too, I think that Dallas is going to be running back to him to give him some money. So he'll heal up, so he'll get that money.
That's what I hope too, because like obviously if anybody's watching the live stream, they can see that I am definitely not a Cowboys fan. I'm an Eagles fan. But I was saying when he had that injury, like I felt super, super bad for the guy because he's exciting to watch. He's fun to have in the division, even if, he makes a tough matchup. And yeah, just seeing guys get injured when they're trying to get a deal hurts. And like the Earl Thomas one where he flipped the bird over to Pete Carroll when he got hurt in Seattle, like that was classic, and I'm glad it hasn't come to that in Dallas, which kind of leads me to believe that they'll probably make something happen. So you were mentioning the market there in Dallas and the opportunities, so we're going to go down to another one for this next group, and we're going to go to Los Angeles with the Rams running backs. This has been a lucrative backfield in the past. Todd Gurley put up some stellar seasons. We're seeing some efficiency here and there from some of these guys, but it's kind of seeming like a bit of a hot hand approach so far. So Kyle, we're kind of starting out a little bit rest of season with most of these guys. So who would you take as the guy you want for the rest of 2020?
Yeah, as for the Rams, they have even more attempts than the Ravens. They're second in the league in attempts per game.
Mm-hmm.
As for the rest of the season, I'm definitely going Daryl Henderson, just because he's been so good, and he seems to be the guy out of those three who's elevated himself so far.
Mm-hmm. Which is like, if you look at the snaps, Malcolm Brown has the most snaps, but I think that's kind of the veteran nod. Maybe some of the blocking stuff, he's a little bit bigger than Daryl Henderson as well, but I'm with you on Henderson as well. Kaynen, where are you sitting for this backfield?
Yeah, I'm 100% on Henderson, especially for the rest of the season. You mentioned his snaps, and his snaps, I mean, Michael Brown has more total snaps, but Daryl Henderson's snaps are going up each week, and he's had over 50 the last 2 weeks. So I like to see that. And he's led in attempts as far as rushing attempts 5 out of the 7 weeks so far. So I like him the most, and he's still a viable option in the pass game as well. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. He's been far more effective in the passing game. Malcolm Brown has a couple more targets, but like far and wide, Daryl Henderson has been more efficient, and he leads the team, like you said, in most rushing categories. So yeah, same for me. Give me Daryl Hendo for the rest of the season, and rest in peace to 2020 Cam Akers, because that's super unfortunate. He hasn't been seeing the field whatsoever, and he's been perfectly fine. So hopefully that shakes out, so they don't waste a second round pick. But this is also kind of what some people thought about Daryl Henderson last year after they spent a second round pick. So I think the future is bright for this backfield. And for now, I'm taking Henderson, and I want to move on to Akers as well, because I'm not personally out on Akers. But what do you guys think about his dynasty value going forward? Like, I think I have him just inside my top 20 dynasty running backs, like 19 or 18 or something, just for the future. Like, Kaynen, you were saying 3 years. I'm looking 3 to 5 when I'm doing my dynasty rankings. But yeah, Kyle, what are you thinking for Akers on his dynasty value?
I mean, I hope he takes Brown's role and it becomes Hendo and Akers. I think that'd be the best for the Rams, at least, hopefully. Because he did show out that 1 week, and then McVay was like, okay, we're going to keep getting this dude touches, and then like 0% snap share the next week. Mm-hmm. Very unfortunate.
Yeah, super unfortunate. I thought he was really good coming out. Just a real quick side note, Hendo and Akers would be a super good band name. Almost sounds like an 80s band name or something like that. But yeah, like Kaynen, where are you sitting with Akers as far as dynasty value going forward?
Right now, I think this is probably the cheapest that you can get him at the moment, so I don't see why not try. I think that he's going to get opportunity, and like you guys have mentioned, he could take that Brown role. Brown's contract is up at the end of the year, so I don't really see a reason that the Rams would have to get a new contract done with him. So I think that having those two backs that have higher draft capital, I think the opportunity will present itself. I think the best thing for Akers is going to be having a legitimate offseason, which he didn't have. So I think that's definitely going to help. And I think if you can grab him at the end of this year, in the middle of this year in Dynasty, and have him heading into next year, I think that it might be a good return for you.
Mm-hmm. I think they could probably still use to add a piece or two to that offensive line as well, just to kind of shore that up and help them out. It's a really good conversation, though, because Daryl Henderson has definitely put himself in that mix, whereas before the season, there was just hopes for him, and now we've seen it on tape, and we've seen him kind of get in there and say, okay, I'm taking some of this pie, so it's time to eat, right? And he's been eating pretty well. I don't want to be a jerk to the person who I traded with, but in one of my home leagues, super flex league, I just traded before the injury Andy Dalton straight up for Daryl Henderson. Nice. Where a guy needed a quarterback. It was between Andy Dalton and Teddy Bridgewater. He floated me both offers, and I accepted the Andy Dalton one, thankfully. So that was a nice little surprise to fix up my running back room on my fantasy roster. So that does it for the crowded position groups, guys. I think we did a really nice little coverage of those groups. A lot to uncover. Like, we could probably almost do a full episode on each of those groups, to be completely honest, if we were going to go super deep into it. But I think we covered it super well, gentlemen. So that's very much appreciated. And so the next segment we are going to get into is a super fun one. We've had a lot of fun on this, and it is called I Got 5 on It with Monkey Knife Fight. So real quick before we get into it, gentlemen, I just want to say another word from our gracious sponsor, Monkey Knife Fight.
If you want the best DFS player prop games in the industry, jump onto Monkey Knife Fight. Monkey Knife Fight is sweeping the nation right now, and we at True North are proud to be doing it along with them. They've got games for all sports and skill levels that are sure to keep you on the edge of your seat, with endless opportunity to watch your winnings pile up. With our promo code TNFF, Monkey Knife Fight will match your first deposit up to $50. So sign up now with our promo code and you can get up to $50 of free money to start making some bank. Again, that's monkeyknifefight.com, and the promo code is TNFF at your first deposit to start playing today.
All right. So yeah, that's again, we want to say a big thanks to our friends over at Monkey Knife Fight. And if you check out their page right now, they actually have a really cool Halloween themed contest. They've actually made stencils for pumpkins of their logo, and they've got two different logos. And if you do one of those pumpkins and you post a picture onto their page, you'll enter you a contest for $50 of Monkey Knife Fight money. And they actually said if you do both of those designs, they'll double it and do 100 of Monkey Knife Fight money. So I think tomorrow I'm going to be printing off some pumpkin stencils, guys, and hitting up the store to get a couple of pumpkins, because I love it when we jump into those contests, or whenever they have those kind of contests. Like sometimes they'll do the touchdown dance contest where you can win $5,000 just for hitting on that contest. So lots of fun to be had on Monkey Knife Fight. I've actually found, guys, a really nice little prop here. I'm just pulling it up and I'm going to screen share it. This one's going to be pretty good. We've got the Atlanta and Carolina game on Thursday night. And if anybody hasn't seen it, I got 5 on it, is a segment where we run through one of these player prop games and we kind of decipher whether these guys are going to hit. And usually we play the more or less game. So I'm just going to get my screen shared here, so any viewers can have a look. And there we are, guys. You can see that all right?
Yep.
Okay, so the one I have chosen tonight centers around Julio Jones and Robbie Anderson. Julio's been a little bit banged up at times, and Robbie Anderson has far outdone those expectations coming into the season with that new offense in Carolina. So to start on Julio, gentlemen, he was banged up. He had a good week last week. The line on him last week was 80.5, and we took that home on this segment, or on a segment of Make and Bank, which is another one of our YouTube shows. So I will tell you guys, there is a little bit of pressure here, because I'm pretty sure we have hit on the last 3 segments of I Got 5 on it. So you guys ready to make me a little bit of chads?
I'm ready to do my best.
It's all in good fun, fellas. It's all in good fun. I'm not gonna be knocking down anybody's doors if you lose me $5 here, so I think it's okay. Just a big shout out to our buddy Beezy there. He said it's a sexy crew. I would agree, if I do say so myself, Bees. And right back at you, brother. So another one of the OGs from the Undroppables crew. So yeah, guys, Julio Jones, Kyle, you can see that line of 75.5 receiving yards. Thursday night, sometimes we get stinker games, sometimes we get decent games. This is probably one of the more intriguing Thursday night matchups in a few weeks that I've seen. So what are you thinking for that Julio 75.5 yard line?
Oh yeah, first of all, I love this matchup. But Julio has hit that in the last 2 games. I don't think the Carolina pass defense is all that great, and Atlanta's going to have to be firing because their pass defense isn't all that great either. So I'm going to go with the over on that.
And how about yourself, Kaynen?
Yeah, I was just taking a look at what that Atlanta, or the defense for Carolina, has been doing. They've given up a 100-yard receiver the last 4 at least, and probably more than that. So it really comes down to, do you think it'll be Julio or do you think it'll be Ridley? And Ridley burned him in that first game, so I think I would go with Julio on this one. I think he'll crack it.
I like that. I'm going to sit with you guys on that. And it's super interesting, Kaynen, kind of like what you said. Kyle, if I was just at first glance didn't see the numbers, I would have thought the exact same thing as you. Carolina's pass defense, not very good, but you look at them against wide receivers on Pro Football Reference, they have the 4th fewest wide receiver passing yards given up, or receiving yards, and they're only averaging 16.6 fantasy points per game to wide receivers. I think some of that could be due to some of the competition that they've had. I can't recall their exact schedule. But regardless of any of that, I believe in Julio, guys. He hit it for us last week. The original line that we agreed to was 91.5 last week, but we went to submit the entry, and then the prop had changed. So we had to go back in, and the line went down to 80.5 yards. So we just smashed that. And we got that win. So I like that pick on the more for Julio, and excited to see a little bit of fireworks for that Atlanta offense. And then moving into Robbie Anderson, 5.5 receptions. I mean, his MO is big plays kind of usually, but then this year he's been getting mega target volume. Kyle, how are you feeling about that one, dude?
Robbie has been over 5.5 in all but 2 games this season. So I think he'll get it again. I think this is going to be a little passing showdown on Thursday night between these 2 teams. So I'll take the over on that as well.
And Atlanta's defense has given up the 5th most receptions to receivers, as well as the 2nd most yards. So definitely a defense that can be had. How about you, Kaynen?
Yeah, I'm definitely taking the over. He's going to get more than 5.5. Atlanta has just looked kind of piss poor on that defensive front, so I think he'll at least get the targets for sure, and he's pretty sure-handed, so he should get the catches.
Yeah, I think it's been really cool to see his resurgence. I didn't really buy too much going into the season just because I'd been burned by him quite a few times the previous few seasons with the Jets. But I guess that's what I get for putting too much stock in what somebody's been doing with the Jets, I guess. But yeah, he's got 3 out of his 6 or 7 games where he's gotten double-digit targets, and then the other 4 games are 8, 8, 5, and 5. So I think he's going to be getting probably in the 8 to 10 target range, and he definitely has a chance to hit that reception total. So I'm going for it, guys. And I know the segment is called I Got 5 on it, but I think we're going to up the ante a little bit because I'm pretty confident we're going to drop a 20 spot on this. So gentlemen, if we hit this, we turn that 20 into $70, and maybe I can send you guys some of the Monopoly money that we call currency up here. Nice. I appreciate that, guys. I appreciate you guys having a vested interest in making me some money. I did mention to you guys before the show that I have 3 kids, so I got some mouths to feed. So any little bit helps here.
Yeah, anything we can do to help, man. Anything at all.
Yeah. For a struggling startup podcaster, right? No, it's been a lot of fun playing over at Monkey Knife Fight, and like I said, we really, really appreciate the work they've done to kind of get us into the fold and believing in our product as well. So we at True North are super appreciative. So the last segment of the night, I like to call this trend spotting because we like to take some observations around the league and decipher whether this is a trend that any of our listeners or viewers can rely on for us moving forward, or if this is something we might need to quote unquote pump those brakes on. So the first guy, we're actually going to dig right into a couple of players, very, very hot names in the fantasy industry, I guess you would call them. The first guy we're going to talk about is Antonio Gibson. He is over the past 4 weeks the running back 10. He's had 30% of the team opportunities with 16 targets and 53 rush attempts, which is more than he had his entire collegiate career. It's been pretty cool to see out of Antonio Gibson in what is essentially a shit offense. Kyle, how did you feel about Antonio Gibson coming into the season, and what do you think his outlook now is going forward?
So obviously coming into the season before Darius Geis proved himself to not be a stand-up guy, I wasn't all that in on Gibson, but afterwards it's pretty obvious you got to take that number 1 running back in any team pretty much for fantasy, at least at some point. So I got a few shares in my later drafts, but not that many. But yeah, I think he's proved himself to me. He's kind of like Justin Herbert. He's one of those guys who I didn't think was going to be all that much before the draft, but I've watched him in the NFL, and I'm just like, ooh, I really like how this guy plays. He's obviously a baller.
For sure. And I think a lot of people thought he was going to get those receptions, not necessarily get the carry totals, but he had 20 totes this past week in week 7. Kaynen, what are you thinking? Do you think, would you say he's a top 24 running back easy for you going forward, or is it going to be a little spotty with old JD McKissick getting some of those targets too?
I was super skeptical heading into the season on him, but I think moving forward, I'm comfortable with him as a top 24 back rest of the season. He's already had 2 top 24 performances this season and 2 borderline top 24, depending on what format you're playing in. And he sits at that RB 17 around there currently. So I'm comfortable with that, especially since he just got his most work with those 20 totes, as you said, this last week, and he produced with them. And now they're heading into a bye week. They can add him more into the game plan if they like what they saw. I think I'm pretty comfortable looking at him going forward.
Yeah, totally. I like how you laid that out there. And I was talking a little bit about JD McKissick, and he is getting some targets. But if you ask me top 24 for Antonio Gibson, I'm going to smash that right in the McKisser. So easy top 24 for me going forward, especially he's got upside on what we've seen too. Kyle, would you say top 24 for AG throughout the rest of 2020?
Yeah, I would definitely smash that. Just one word to the wise as for those 20 attempts last week. The Washington football team did have 39 overall attempts last week, which is way higher than what they usually have. Before week 7, it was 24.2 attempts per game. So I'm not sure we can expect those 20 carries a game. Obviously, they just immediately stopped the Dallas offense last week and could just run the clock out for the entire game. But he did have a higher attempt share last week. So I'm excited about that going up just in general. So I think even though they're not going to have as many attempts in general, he'll still get more of the lower number of attempts that they will have.
Yeah, for sure. So like you were saying, they were around 24 per game before that. Like even if this guy's getting 12 carries per game plus 4 or 5 targets, which we hope he kind of takes over from JD McKissic, who's got a lot of targets. I think that's super easy, especially because most of us play in full PPR leagues as kind of a standard now. So I'm liking Antonio Gibson, and I'm kind of kicking myself because I wasn't super in on him going forward. I thought it was just kind of one of those guys who's been touted as a super talent that we hadn't seen, who could be somebody who gets misused, especially with the team that he went to. But Ron Rivera has actually been kind of showing that they can use him really nicely. And I mean, the quarterback situation is still garbage as well. So obviously they would like to lean on a running back. So I think that was kind of really well put, guys, on the fact that we've got to see the talent and adjust throughout the season, even if we didn't buy earlier. So I think Antonio Gibson, much like I think you guys said Akers was earlier, I think Antonio Gibson could be cheaper than he will be for the next couple of seasons right now. So still a buying window, even though he did have that big game in week 7.
Right. You like to see the touchdowns too. I mean, he's had 4 touchdowns on the ground. You haven't seen one through the air, but I'm sure he'll have the opportunities in the future. So like to see it.
And you see him in there in the red zone a little bit too, which is something that my former co-host Ty, fellow creator of True North, has this concept that he calls chasing touchdowns, and essentially that's tracking a lot of red zone work and keeping an eye on where guys are being used and how they're being used and whatnot. And so if we're chasing touchdowns, we've seen some red zone work from Antonio Gibson, and that's likely to increase with him being much more suited than say JD McKissic is. The next guy, guys, this is somebody who has been a little bit maligned on my part. I'll be completely honest with you, and that would be Christian Kirk out in Arizona. He's had a good couple of weeks, but I want you guys to tell me if this is a trend or if this is going to end. Kyle, why don't you start?
He's been maligned in my ranks as well. Never really was in on Christian Kirk, but I think it's helped him surprisingly to have DeAndre Hopkins on the other side, just because he does bring so much coverage and it allows Kirk to get open a little more. And obviously the Cardinals with Kingsbury are going to throw the ball all over the yard all the time. So I think there's a possibility for Kirk to keep this up, but I'm not buying just because the price is probably pretty high, and was never interested before. So
yeah, I gotta say I'm still with you there. Like I'm starting to see the light a little bit. I'm seeing what he potentially can be. But my big thing with him was that before this season, I can't remember the exact stat, but I think he had at least 100 yards or a touchdown in 5 games in his career, and those 5 games accounted for more than 1/3 of his fantasy points over that career. So the inconsistency was what got me. But like you said, like Nuke is a big help for him going across from him, and not necessarily Christian Kirk being that number 1 target. We've talked about it before here on the show, is that like sometimes a guy comes in and puts somebody in the place that they need to be, like on like the target totem pole or whatever. And I think that's kind of what might have happened for Christian Kirk here. And he's doing it with like air yards and then like deeper big plays and stuff, which we hadn't seen before. Kaynen, what are you thinking about Christian Kirk? Have you been a believer in the past?
I haven't actually, so we're all kind of right there. But overall, I'm still a little bit skeptical. I mean, yes, he's looked good, especially these past 2 weeks, but it's been against some of the worst pass defenses in the league as well. Luckily, his schedule isn't super crazy the rest of the season, but I don't think it's going to be as rosy as it has been these last few weeks. And then on top of that, you look at the last game, and that he had 8 targets, which is his most he's seen all season. But also, Kyler threw for the most attempts he's thrown for all season as well. So, and your starting running back went down in that same game. So I think it was kind of the perfect storm for him. So if I could, I'd probably still be looking to get the most I could for him now that he's had these big games, but I'm still skeptical on him.
Yeah, there's some shine on that offense right now too. So I like that point that you could sell them, because people seeing them beat the Seahawks this past week. Like I live in Western Canada, right above Washington, so it's like mega Seahawks country here right now. So there was a lot of talk about that game up where I live, and I think a lot of fantasy players could be seeing the same, because the Seahawks are a fantastic team, obviously. But yeah, Christian Kirk, I just can't quite buy yet. I can't quite buy. There's been a lot of talk in the Canadian group chats about him too, but I'm not there. But if you can sell him for that price, or if you did buy him earlier in the season when he was cheaper, then good on you, right? So kind of somebody who I'm maybe a little bit more indifferent on than anything. But yeah, those have been our trend spotting players, gentlemen. It was good to get into that. It's good to do the whole show, guys. That's kind of wraps it up for most of the show sheet that we got there. Really quick before we ride out, gentlemen, I'm actually, guys, launching a new sponsor on this very show. So we have teamed up with Trophy Smack. Obviously, everybody knows them as a provider of great trophies and whatnot. So if you want to make your fantasy league more than just a fantasy, you need Trophy Smack. With trophies, belts, rings, loser trophies, and draft boards, you can take your league to the next level. As part of our partnership at trophysmack.com, if you purchase a trophy or a belt and enter our promo code TNFF, you will get a championship ring 100% free. So that's a $60 value for free just by using the promo code TNFF if you're buying a belt or a trophy. And if you haven't seen those belts or those trophies, they are fantastic. Trophy Smack actually teamed up with Through Monkey Knife Fight and the Canadian National Basketball League to provide the trophy for that league. And I've seen pictures of that thing, and it is money. They make some really nice stuff. So definitely encourage anybody to go over to trophysmack.com and just kind of boost the bragging rights of their league, right? Like, I've got an awesome home league that if we had one of these things, or if we had a belt that I could roll into my live draft just with it on my shoulder, just like throwing it at everybody's face, oh man, that would be 100% glory. So thanks to Matt and the gang over at Trophy Smack for getting this all set up, and we're super excited. So gentlemen, got to say thank you so much for coming on. It was really nice to get some of the new blood of the Undroppables crew. I mean, you guys have been around the Undroppables for a while, so you're not necessarily new blood, but maybe new Undroppables members to the True North pod. So I appreciate that, guys. And I will probably be reaching out to you guys again in the next little while to see if you want to come back. So Kyle, why don't you tell the people where to find you and what you've been working on with the Undroppables crew?
Yeah, you can find me. It's right there under my face at KL_fantasy on Twitter. I write for the Undroppables. I write a weekly stream option article. Admittedly, my process hasn't done so well this season, other than on defense. If you started my defense every week, then you currently have the defense number 2 in fantasy. But
Nice.
Quarterbacks and tight ends, not as hot. But yeah, you can check me out on theundroppables.com every week. It's Tuesdays. Comes out on Tuesdays. See the not the waiver, but the stream option every week.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, the undroppables.com is the new site, and Chalk has done some amazing work. That site looks super good. Kaynen, how about yourself? Where can the people find you, and what are you working on for the Can't Cut crew? And talk about your podcast as well with the scary movies.
For sure. Yeah, you can find me at Kane Rob right under my picture as well. Right now on the Undroppables, I work on the weekly flex article. I highlight 2 players for the varying sizes of leagues, 10-team leagues, 12-team leagues, and then 14 and bigger. So I try to hit 2 guys I think are going to be smash plays, and then I have 3 boom bust options. And then we're hitting Twitter every week, and I'm hitting a panel of our Undroppables guys, bringing them your flex questions, and then we'll give you our consensus decision there. So feel free to tweet at me each week, and I'll get those tweets into our article. And then outside of that, I produce the Undrafted podcast with Scott as the host. So check that out for sure. He's been killing it on there, so love to see it. And then I have my own podcast as well, not fantasy football related, but more scary movies. It's at Grim Conclusions. And if you have movie suggestions, feel free to send them my way, because it's a fun little side gig. So hit me up. And thanks for having us on too. It was a blast to be here.
100%, fellas. 100%. It was the pleasure was all mine. I will say 100%. So nice work on the Undrafted pod too, with also known as Jax Falcone. Find him at I Know Game Theory. He's going to come on the show in a couple weeks. Actually, I was just talking to him today. I love having him on, and the rest of the crew too. So you guys just gave a nice little glimpse into the continuous content that comes out of the Undroppables brand. You guys, like, I don't think there goes a day without a new piece of content coming out of you guys, and it's all really good stuff. So shout out to all the guys working there. They know who they are. Most of them are friends of True North, and we really appreciate their support. So check out their work. They got the YouTube bumping too. I know Tommy Mo's been doing some work on the YouTube stuff. He puts out a hilarious his waiver wire video every week. Follow him at 2on1FFB. Just like, I could list all those guys right now. I probably don't really have time, but yeah, just check them out. Most of the people in the community know who they are anyway, right? So just a couple of quick clerical notes here, guys. Next week, for any listeners or viewers, we will be changing our time. I'm going to be on Tuesday night, and the Gold Jacket podcast with Jim and Connor is going to be flipping over to Wednesday night. I'm going to be going on another show on Wednesday night, so the guys graciously were able to switch that date for me, so I appreciate that from them. And definitely make sure you check out the Gold Jacket podcast. They're putting in some really good work over there. And yeah, lastly, I can be found at TCL14, obviously, but that's not super important. Make sure you go follow us on Twitter at TrueNorthFFB. That's the important one. Subscribe to all the pods. Subscribe to the TNFF network on YouTube. Like I said earlier, we got like 6 to 7 weekly shows, and 4 of them are live on YouTube and Periscope. So we got lots of content for you, and hopefully you like hanging out with us, us Canadian schmucks. So again, I want to say a big thanks to Kyle Larson and Kaynen Harris. Really appreciate you guys coming on, and looking forward to the next one, gentlemen. So until next week, take care, everybody. Peace.